And sorry it took me so late to get the recording out last time. One thing led to another. We were away, but I trust you got it yesterday if you wanted to look at it. And now here we are. Um, I wanted to go back just to the end of chapter 3, which we looked at last time, and then continue. We're going to do 4, 5, 7, and 9. So I would remind you also just of how we got where we are. Um, Amos starts out, the book started out with prophesied, with Amos having prophesied against a variety of other kingdoms, including the kingdom uh, of Israel, in a very perfunctory way. And we can imagine the people here in Beit El and in Judah who feel like they've escaped, but no, breaking the normal paradigm, which would be 7. Amos goes on to what is a really fierce condemnation of Israel. And as we'll see, this theme continuing, not just because they have abandoned the covenant in ritual ways. For other prophets have really focused on idolatry. That this was a broken covenant. The one that comes to mind, though we're not going to look at him, is Hosea, who actually God has Hosea marry a prostitute who has children by other men, because it becomes emblematic of the people of Israel who have married someone who is, the people of Israel who are like a woman who has violated her marriage vows and gone whoring after other men. And so it becomes an example for the prophet Hosea, and it gets drawn out in a variety of ways. It becomes an example of that lack of adherence to the covenant around idolatry. But here the concern, and we're going to see it very dramatically, the concern here is not idolatry, it's not ritual, it is a violation of an ethical, moral covenant. I could go so far as to say that in the divine mind is paramount. And I think I'll be able to show you that in a variety of ways today. So we start out with this. We're at the very end of chapter 3. Hear this and warn the house of Jacob. So here, the speaker, of course, is God, and God is saying to Amos, go and deliver this message, says the sovereign God of hosts. So sovereign in the sense that God is truly the ruler. God of hosts is an interesting term, and it generally has a military connotation. The Lord of hosts is the Lord of God's army, in a sense, the commander in chief. And when we think of that, we think of conquest, we think of destruction. And we're going to see exactly what God will do. That when I punish Israel for its transgressions, I will wreak judgment on the altar of Beit El, and the horns of the altar shall be cut off and shall fall to the ground. So a couple of things about this that I failed to mention last time. One is that the altar is where the people could make sacrifices to atone for their sins. The chatat, the sin offering, could be brought, although the chatat is limited and generally confined to sins that were done inadvertently, but in some cases also for deliberate sins. If they're deliberate, one has the assumption that the person, unless they, have come to realize the wrongness of what they did, is unlikely to go and offer a sacrifice. At any rate, the horns of the altar shall be cut off. These altars have four horns, one on each corner, not literally horns, but things that are protruding up. And the significance here, I think, is that the altar could be a sanctuary for someone who is running away, for example, from the blood avenger who is seeking to kill him because he inadvertently killed someone else. He can run to the altar, hold on to the horns from which he will be taken to be judged, and if he's found not guilty of murder, be brought to the city of refuge. So by wrecking the altar, God is rejecting the cult and in fact cutting off an avenue for someone to seek sanctuary. I will wreck the winter palace together with the summer palace. The ivory palaces will be diminished, the great houses destroyed. So the idea of palaces is a reminder that what Jonah is condemning in God's name, most of all, are the wealthy. They have palaces, ivory palaces. Not literally that the palace is made out of ivory, but things are decorated with ivory. We saw earlier that people recline on their beds of ivory, extraordinarily expensive, that is being used now just for ornament. Great here is, it seems to be not just that they're big, but they are the houses of the nobility. And now we get this really stern condemnation. Hear this word, you cows of Bashan. On the hill of Samaria, you defraud the poor, rob the needy, and say to your husbands, bring, let us carouse. So first of all, this is a reference to women. These are the wealthy women who say to their husbands, come, bring, so we can party, right? The commentators are unclear whether cows is that pejorative word. Certainly in the modern context, you would think, fat cow. No one would say that today, one would hope, but it is a pejorative reference. The commentaries, particularly some of the more modern commentaries, based on other uses, do not necessarily see this as a put down to women, so much as an encouragement to their husbands who are already doing this. And note, these people are being condemned again, and we'll see it repeatedly, defrauding the poor, robbing the needy. My sovereign God swears irrevocably. So we've had 3 warnings, nothing happened, 4 warnings, and now God is beyond repenting of what God has done. This in an odd way reminds me to a certain extent of Pharaoh, and this is one should never say that God is like Pharaoh, but Pharaoh who had hardened his heart, relented, etc. At a certain point, he can't go back. And here God says, I've had it with you. Punishment, I've given you opportunities, but punishment has to be felt. And so God says, days are coming upon you. And this is a theme which, and we'll see it referred to later on as the day of the Lord. This is very eschatological in some ways, certainly later on. The idea is there will be a massive reckoning. And ultimately, we'll see very few will survive. You will be carried off in baskets to the last one in fish baskets. These are people who will be carried off into slavery. Maybe this is a reference to tying back to these wives who will now become slaves. You'll be taken out of the city, each one through a breach straight ahead, and flung on the refuge heap. So here it seems to be not just slaves, but the dead. And the idea of a breach and straight ahead, there'll be no need to go out through the gate. The walls will have been destroyed. You'll be able to go straight. And now we get this really sarcastic comment. Come to Beit El and transgress, to Gilgal and transgress even more. Come to Beit El and sin, to Gilgal and sin some more. Beit El is, of course, the main sanctuary. It is where the sacrifices are offered, and it seems to be where tithes were brought. And so here, Amos is inviting people to come to do their cultic duties, and that in itself will be a transgression. It's more than just saying you have, ignored the poor and the hungry. God is disgusted, and when you bring those offerings in not having mistreated the poor, you are in fact making it worse rather than better. That in itself is sinful. The idea is you have to clean up your house before you can ask God or offer an offering of thanksgiving. You're bringing the tithes, one of which is to care for the poor. At the same time, you are defrauding and oppressing and stealing from the poor. You'll burn an offering, a thank offering, korban todah, of leavened bread, and proclaim free offerings loudly, for you love that sort of thing, O Israelites. So here, the idea is a free will offering is a korban shalom. It's a way of thanking God for the goodness in your life, parallel to a thank offering. But the key here is loudly. It's almost like boasting. And here he says, come and sin. You love that sort of thing, O Israelites. Now, you can imagine that a message like this is going to upset a lot of people. And I would go so far as to say, particularly the priests, because this is how they make their living. Remember that the priests, Levites, have no land. They are dependent on tithes, and they get a portion of most sacrifices, and that's what they live on. Only some are consumed in their entirety. Most, a portion is given to the priests. So now, if we think about that and think about the sacrifices as being eaten, now we're switching to the people as a whole. I, for my part, have given you cleanness of teeth in your towns, lack of food in your settlements, yet you did not turn back to me. In other words, God had punished the people for all that they had done, for the way they had mistreated the most vulnerable. And even though they had they have been punished with famine, didn't stop them. So with God withholds rain before harvest, so that it's not just that there's a famine, but whatever they've prepared now will be ruined. And then we get this: I will make it rain in one town and not on another. One field will be rained upon, while another on which it did not rain would wither. So here, what's this should have woken them up, because there's something miraculous, supernatural about this. And here we are coming into some curses that had fallen upon the people, which are reminiscent of the plagues upon Egypt, which were meant to cause Pharaoh to repent. And so one of those plagues, it's not the same thing as the rain, remember, was the plague of darkness, where it would be a plague in one place, but not in the other. The Egyptian houses were dark, and the Israelite houses still had light. 2 or 3 towns would wander to a single town to drink water, but their thirst would be not slaked, right? And yet you did not turn back to me. I scourged you with blight and mildew. Repeatedly, your gardens and vineyards, your fig trees and olive trees were devoured by locusts. Again, a reminder of the plagues on Egypt. Yet you did not turn back to me. I sent against you pestilence in the manner of Egypt, very specific. I slew your young men with the sword together with your captive horses. I made the stench of your armies rise in your nostrils. You did not turn back to me. So here we see that God has done anything that God could do to get them to turn back. There's been war against them, so much so that the armies, unburied, have the reek of the corpses have arisen in their nostrils. And now we get, I've wrought destruction upon you, as when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. You have become like a brand plucked from burning, yet you will not turn back. You have not turned back to me. So here we get a reference to what probably is an earthquake. That seems to be what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, some kind of eruption or an earthquake. And so a brand, right? You have a fire and you pull out a stick, and that's what's left. Everything else gets burned, and yet you've not turned back to me. Assuredly, because I am doing that to you, even so will I act towards you, O Israel. Prepare to meet your God. Right? So God has exhausted all attempts to bring the people to heel. They still continue to mistreat the poor, the orphan, the widow. And now we get this language of God's power, majesty. Behold, the one who formed the mountains and created the wind, whose wishes have been made known to mortals. Right? Even though God is this ultimate power, one who turns blackness into daybreak, who treads upon the high places of the earth, whose name is God, the the God of hosts, and God made his wishes known to people. He let them know what he expects, and they haven't done it. Again, God of hosts, this military image. Hear this word that I intone as a dirge over you, O Israel. Fallen, not to rise again, is the maiden Israel, abandoned on her soil with none to lift her up. And here we come back to the image of the fat cows, but no, this is the maiden. This language sounds a little like the language that we see in Echa, the book of Lamentations over the destruction of the temple, where Jerusalem is compared to a maiden who has been destroyed. Thus says the sovereign God about the house of Israel, the town that marches out 1,000 strong shall have 100 left. The one that marches out 100 strong shall have 10 left. So there's going to be a war, and the people will be decimated. Thus says God to the house of Israel, seek me and you will live. Right? So again, even though it's decreed, there is this sense here, maybe if the people repent, but do not seek Bethel, do not go to Gilgal, do not cross over to Beersheba. Gilgal shall go into exile, Bethel shall become a delusion. So these were ancient cultic sites. Do not seek Bethel means don't go and bring those sacrifices. That's not going to help you to live. No, seek me. This is a really different tone from what we've seen before among prophets. That in order to seek God, if you're behaving the way you're behaving, you have to do it directly. And if you think about it, this is, I wouldn't say a complete rejection of sacrifice, but it does suggest that there are ways to know God, to become close to God, and the sacrifices won't help you. Okay, seek God and you will live. Otherwise God will rush like a fire upon the house of Joseph, contain Bethel with none to quench him. For you have turned justice into wormwood and hurl righteousness to the ground. Wormwood, of course, is extremely bitter. And then we get who made the Pleiades and Orion, who turns deep darkness into dawn, who darkens day into night, who summons the waters of the sea, who pours them out on the earth, whose name is Adonai, whose name is God. Here again, we have this image of God's enormous power that is, we can look at the stars and God made them. There is a long passage in the book of Job where Job, who has been unjustly afflicted by God, demands judgment, demands to be exonerated, and God shows him a vision of God's majesty as the creator of the universe. And that's a very long, beautiful passage and really worth reading towards the end of Job. But here we just get a little hint of it. And that God is the one who hurls destruction on strongholds and fortresses. Why? Because those who have these strongholds and fortresses, they hate the arbiter in the gate. They detest the one whose plea is just, right? So the gate, again, that's the place where judgment is done. The arbiter is the one, perhaps we saw this earlier, who is taking bribes. And detesting, that is, detesting the one whose plea is just. Okay. Assuredly, because you impose a tax on the poor and exert from them a levy of grain, you have built houses of hewn stone, you will not live in them. You have planted delightful vineyards, but shall not drink their wine. Um, this reminds us a little bit about Deuteronomy. Um, and actually, here, the vineyards and wine uh, actually is very similar to the passage of those who are exempt from military service. They have planted vineyards, but if they go off, they won't have an opportunity to harvest that first crop. For I have noted how many of your crimes, how countless your sins, you enemies of the righteous, you takers of bribe, you who subvert the gate, the cause of the needy. Assuredly, at such time, the prudent keep silent, for it is an evil time. He is, I think, talking about himself here. It would be prudent to keep silent, and if you don't keep silent, the consequences for the speaker will be not good. And then we get, again, seek good and not evil, so that you may live, that the eternal God of hosts may truly be with you. Hate evil, love good, establish justice in the court. Perhaps the eternal God of hosts shall be gracious to the remnant of Joseph, right? The last parts that will be saved. Assuredly, thus says God, the sovereign, the God of hosts. In every square there will be lamenting, in every street cries of woe. The farmhand shall be called to mourning, those skilled in wailing to lament. The farmhand who should be out doing his work will be called into public mourning, and the professional wailers will be called to fund. Is that there was, and we know this even in rabbinic times. If you had a funeral, there were people you could hire, and they would go with the procession, and they would wail and weep. And that in itself would be kind of infectious, so that other people would also do it. For there will be a lamenting in every vineyard when I pass through your midst. Are you who wished for the day of God? Why should you want the day of God? It will be darkness and not light. Okay. And then let me just see how much. Yeah, I want to keep going a little bit more before we break. So the day of the Lord, this day of retribution, why would you want it? As if someone were to run from a lion and get attacked by a bear, or upon making it indoors, would lean on their hand on a wall and get bitten by a snake. Surely the day of God shall be not light, but darkness, blackest night without a glimmer. And here we get it explicitly. I spurn your festivals. I am not at peace by your solemn assemblies. If you offer me burnt offerings or grain offerings, I will not accept them. Pay heed to your gifts of fatlings. Spare me the sound of your hymns. Let me not hear the music of lyres. And then we get this statement: let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream. This has actually been used in some modern prayers, and it comes from here. Not the whole context, obviously, but this. And the idea here is probably of a vadi, a dry riverbank, where the water will come rushing in. When it rains, they're no longer dry, and literally they well up and they come and fill the vadi, and righteousness. And unlike a vadi which will dry out, righteousness will continue unfailing. Do you offer your sacrifices and oblation to me? Did you offer your sacrifices and oblation to me in the 40 years in the wilderness? No, you didn't, O house of Israel. Nonetheless, uh, I was there for you. I didn't need that. God, of course, did punish in the wilderness, but didn't destroy them. And you shall carry off your king, the images you have made from yourselves of your astral deity. This is a little bit idolatry. I will drive you into exile beyond Damascus, says God, whose name is God of hosts. All right, I'm going to open it up now before we do the other two chapters. Okay, questions, comments, reactions. I know it's a lot. Yeah, Saul.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a trifle, but I think in chapter 4, in sentence 4, they were talking about
I'm not here.
korbanot, sacrifices at the altar, mizbeach, uh, sacrifices of lechem. I don't think they're allowed to do that.
Uh, right, right. So you're absolutely right. It seems to be a reference, I think, to the showbread. They're not
Oh,
literally sacrifices, right? But there are
oh,
these loaves that are put in the sanctuary and then taken away after a week. So I suspect that's it because, as you say, the matzah was the only sacrifice that could be offered, and we see that again and again. So thanks for clarifying that. Otherwise, I don't understand it. And since the text itself seems to be talking about the people being punctilious about their sacrifices, it would be completely out of context. It wouldn't make any sense at all. So I think that's what it is. Um, Anything else about this? Yeah,
like many haftarot, there's a lot of punishment, but at the end, there's also
right,
redemption. Very, very
right.
simple. Yeah.
Yes. So here the redemption will be for the remnant. But when we get to chapter 9, well, you're going to see references to Haftarot and also to that vision, really the positive ending. And just there is a tradition. Not sure it's everywhere in all the biblical books. Certainly, when we come to reading in the sanctuary, you don't end in Aliyah on a negative note. You don't end a Haftorah on a negative note. I'm thinking, for example, of the Haftorah that we read on Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat, which ends on a negative note. And then what we do is we go back and repeat the penultimate verse, which was more, that they will come to God, right, on Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat, right? So again, there's an avoidance of that. We'll see that at the end of this book. And yes, there's always an attempt for hope. There's always an attempt for something positive. Here, God is saying, it's too much. It's gone too far. I won't destroy the people entirely. And we'll see, despite Jonah's condemnation, really harsh, brutal condemnation, um, he didn't want this to happen. So we'll see that. Anything else? Yeah, Sandy.
Excuse me. So I just looked it up. I asked Chat about but let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream, because it sounds so familiar. And it is in the Siddur. It says here, I don't know if this is correct. I mean, exact spot it is. It says it's in Seduke de Zimra, verse of praise,
Yes.
Nishmat Kol Chai. At the end of Nishmat, a series of verses from Ketuvim and the prophets are recited, and one of them is Amos 5:24.
Let me just take a look at Nishmat quickly, since I have a Siddur here. Nishmat Koha. That wasn't what I was thinking of.
I don't think it's in Nishmat.
Yeah, what I think,
One of the Tehillim, I think, at Pesuke.
yeah, which is not surprising since it's Chat GPT. What I what I want to look at, which is where I thought it was. Yes, okay, so this is a reference. It's loosely, it's not, so it is, I wonder where the source for this is, if I can find it. At the end of the prayer for peace, which is recited in many synagogues today, we have a prayer for the United States, a prayer for Israel, and then a prayer for peace, which seems so apt today. The last line, let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. That's from somewhere. Let me see, there are notes. I don't know if they're source notes, I think. I thought. Yeah, so this is page 149. All right, it's taken from Likutei Tfilot, which is a work I don't know. It's a later work. Okay. Anything else? And in terms of Psalms, Sandy, if you want to do a quick check,
Yeah.
ask if it's in Psalms. Since you've got ChatGPT open, we'll see if they can do a little better.
You were right to ask that. The phrase sounds very much like something from Psalms, but it's not in Psalms. That's what it
Okay,
says.
so it's only later. Or they're wrong again. You know,
That could be true.
sometimes, all right, I don't want to take any more time with this. It might be worth looking at one of the other engines that does this kind of thing. I'm gonna go back.
Can I ask
Quickly.
you? Yeah. It just seems that what you just read, all this, that there's so much all these bad things. I mean, why doesn't God just say, well, reform? I mean, do this, do that. I mean, give a chance for forgiveness instead of all this time spent on the other.
Yes, because God has done that 4 times and brought bad things, and nothing worked. And therefore, God has decided, and the reference to Sodom and Gomorrah is not out of place in a certain sense. It's become intolerable, but God will not destroy the people. Right? And that, there has to be a reckoning, there has to be an accounting, there has to be a cleansing. It reminds me of when God says to Moses, I've had it. I'm going to wipe out this people. I'll start with you. And Moses intercedes. And we'll see that the prophet Amos also had interceded. But in the end, it's just too much. The people are just so thoroughly evil in God's eyes, right? I mean, I'm trying to give you a sense, who knows, of the divine mind. But that seems to be what Amos is saying here. Okay, let me jump back.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to 7. Okay. This is what my sovereign God showed me. A plague of locusts was created at the time when the late sown crops were beginning to sprout. The late sown crops after the reaping, and when it was finished, devouring the herbage in the land, I said, "Oh, my sovereign eternal, pray forgive. How will Jacob survive? He is so small." And God relented concerning this. It will not come to pass. Right. So here we see actually that Amos interceded, as Moses had interceded successfully. And then we get this: my sovereign God showed me was summoned to contend by fire that consumed the great deep and consuming fire. Again, oh, sovereign eternal one, how will Jacob survive? Won't come to pass. This is what I was shown. God was standing on a wall checked with a plumb line. God says to him, Amos, what do you see? This is a little bit different, right? Because here we get the dialogue. You see this very much, you see the whole thing. This is something that God does. God gives prophets a vision, and then the vision gets interpreted. See it in the beginning of Jeremiah, for example. A cauldron which is tipping from the north becomes a northern invasion. So here is a plumb line, and God says, "I will apply a plumb line." It's so crooked, right? This is a level to make sure things are level. It's so crooked, and I will pardon no more. The shrines of Isaac will be laid to waste, the sanctuaries of Israel to ruin. I will turn upon the house of Jeroboam with the sword. Okay, and now we get the only narrative in this book, and it's really quite striking. Amaziah, the priest of Beit El, sent a message to King Jeroboam of Israel. Amos is conspiring against you within the house of Israel. The country cannot endure the things he is saying. So who is this guy? He is the head priest of the sanctuary at Beit El. And remember, Amos is saying Beit El will be destroyed. Amos is saying that God despises the sacrifices which are feeding the priests at Beit El. So he sends a message to the king. But what is the message? No mention whatsoever of his personal involvement. No, he's just advising the king about what? About someone who's stirring up insurrection. He's conspiring against you. He is, of course, not conspiring against him at all. He's declaring that that he will turn his house with the sword. But that's not a conspiracy, it's a prophecy. So Amaziah wants to get rid of it, Amos, and he's using this to get him. For he has said, he will die by the sword, right? Amaziah also said to Amos, seer off to you with you to the land of Judah. That's where you're from. Earn your living there. Do your prophesying there. So he said, he's accusing him essentially. You're a prophet. This is what you do. People pay you and you give them prophecies, right? He's discrediting him as a true prophet. He is diminishing him. He's just a mere prophet. Now, the irony here, of course, is how is Amaziah making his living, right? He's making it off these sacrifices, which are being, purchased with the money that should go to the poor. So there's a kind of irony here. Go do your prophesying there. Go home. Make your living there. Don't ever prophesy again at Beit El. It is the king's sanctuary, a royal palace, right? So this is the official temple of the king. And what is Amos saying? I'm not a prophet. I'm not a prophet's disciple. I am a cattle breeder and a tender of sycamore figs. So you got me wrong. I'm not a professional. I'm not one of those people at all. And I'm not the disciple. I'm not part of these bands of prophets who follow one, right? You've got it wrong. That's how you see prophecy, right? I'm a cattle breeder. Remember, cattle breeders are wealthy people. And not only that, I also have figs, which are seasonal, so I can leave them for a while. But God took me away from following the flock, and God said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. So he says, he says, therefore, hear the word of God. I must not prophesy against the house of Israel or preach about the house of Isaac, but this I swear is what God said. And here we get really, your wife shall play the whore in the town. Your sons and daughters fall by the sword. Your land will be divided up with a measuring line, and you yourself will die on impure soil, for Israel will be exiled. So here we get a prophecy which is not only about famine and death and destruction, but it's also about exile. And the wife here, it's not clear whether this is specific to the priests or it is more general. It does remind me a little bit, in terms of the sons and daughters falling by the sword. It's a little bit of like what Samuel prophesies to Eli, whose sons were behaving immorally. At any rate, this is what my sovereign God showed me. Actually, I'm going to skip down now. Let's go to 9. And we'll skip a little bit more. Okay, I want to, just the language here is very nice. If they burrow down to Sheol, from there my hand will take them. If they ascend to heaven, from there I will bring them down. If they hide at the top of Mount Carmel, the highest peak in Israel, other than, of course, Mount Hermon in the Golan, if they conceal themselves at the bottom of the sea, there I will command the serpent to bite them. They go into captivity. It is the sovereign of God who's touched the earth trembles, and so on. And then we get this really striking statement. To me, O Israel, you are just like the Cushites, right? These are the Nibians. They are as far from Israel as you can get, as far from God's temple as you can get. You're just like them. True, I brought up Israel from the land of Egypt, but the Philistines from Kaptor, the Arameans from Kir. So he says, you're not special. You think you're special, but you're not special. Earlier on, we had a reference to the chosen people in the sense that God said, your relationship with me has made it worse, not better. Right? We have a covenant and still you're mistreating the poor. It won't save you. Here, though, there's a very universalist theme. God, who is the God of all the earth, is concerned about the how other peoples on the earth are treated. God acts in history, and not just to the Israelites, right? God, the Exodus, which we think of, as the ultimate here. Well, God also brought the Philistines from Kaptor and the Arameans from Kir. Behold, my sovereign God is keeping an eye on the sinful kingdom. I will wipe it off the face of the earth, but I will not wholly wipe out the house of Jacob. So, for I will give the order and shake the house of Israel through the sieve, as one shakes sand in a sieve, and not a pebble falls to the ground. All the sinners will perish, who boast never shall evil overtake us. And then we get this messianic vision. In that day, I will set up the fallen booth of David. I will mend its breaches and set up its ruins anew. I will build it firm as the days of old. So the booth, of course, this is Sukkot David Hanofelet, the fallen sukkah of David. Very interesting image. We, of course, on Sukkot have the tradition of, Hamakom Yakim Lanu et Sukkot David Hanofelet. May God restore the fallen booth of David. Why is it a booth? It's not really clear, but a booth is, after all, fragile. And bad things happen after David, particularly in the time after Solomon when the kingdoms are divided. One could say that David's empire, the empire that David began, had fallen. So this is a prediction that the people of Israel will be returned. They'll become whole, and they will have even a larger holding in Edom. And all nations once attached to my name, declares God. Any nation which had anything that had God's name on it, they will be attached. And then a time is coming. And before we had a time is coming, a day of doom. And now the plower shall meet the reaper. Ordinarily, you would reap, and then you couldn't plow for months. It'll be continuous. The harvest will just be continuous. The treader of grapes, the one who holds the bag of seed, so much. The mountains will drip wine, the hills will wave grain. I will restore my people Israel. They will rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They will plant vineyards, drink their wine, till gardens, eat their fruit. I will plant them upon their soil, never more to be uprooted from the soil that I have given them. So we do end with a restoration. Any questions or comments on Amos? I find him just remarkable, particularly his sarcasm, his way, his literary, he's very sharp. I love the scene between him and the priest. It's short, but it says volumes. And then the language at the very end is beautiful, I think, really beautiful. Comments, questions? We have a few minutes left, very few. Anything? Yes.
I wanted to ask Sandra, what were you talking about before when you mentioned water, and you were looking for something
Sandy, unmute.
I asked ChatGPT where it is in the Siddur.
about water flowing.
No, about let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream.
I saw something different. It was one of the Tehillim about God causes freezing, and then the water flows again. But that's one of the Tehillim. It's got nothing to do with what you said.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay.
this seems to be original to this image, original to Amos, if ChatGPT is to be trusted, or corrected and trusted. And it does, as I said, make its way into the Siddur, at least in some form, in the prayer for peace. So we've seen bits and pieces here. The ending, of course, is a Haftorah, very powerful one, I think. The Sukkot David Hanafelet, the fallen Sukkah of David, makes its way into the Birkat Hamazon, grace after meals, that we say during the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, so I will hope to see you next week. I need to find something that I will cover in 2 weeks, because then the third week we will turn to the biblical verses, at least some of them, that are used in the Passover Haggadah, which hopefully will enrich your Seder a little bit. All right, everybody, have a great week. See you next Tuesday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.